The first time Adam saw the dog, he nearly didn't stop. It was late November, one of those bitter evenings when the air feels like shards of glass on the skin and the trees groan under the weight of impending snow. Adam had just finished his shift at the railway depot and was driving home along the back road that curved through a stretch of half-frozen forest. He liked the quiet of that route. No traffic, no noise, just darkness and trees. Silent company for a man who had grown used to being alone. But then he saw it. A flash of movement near the tracks. A shape, small and hunched, barely visible in the dim orange flicker of the old streetlight near the overpass. At first, Adam thought it was a raccoon, then a fox. But when he slowed down and leaned toward the windshield, he saw the truth. It was a dog. It sat shivering in the snow, ribs pressing sharply through its thin, muddied coat. One ear hung limp and torn. Its tail was tucked so tightly between its legs it was barely visible. There was no collar, no tag, just two wide amber eyes staring directly into Adam's soul. He almost drove on. He told himself someone else would stop, that the dog belonged to a nearby farmhouse, that he couldn't take on something else. Not now, not with everything already so heavy. But something in the dog's gaze stopped him, a kind of knowing, a silent plea. Adam pulled over. He opened the passenger door and stepped out cautiously, the cold cutting through his work boots and seeping into his bones. "Hey," he said gently, crouching low. "What are you doing out here, huh?" The dog didn't move. Adam reached into his coat pocket and pulled out half of the sandwich he hadn't eaten at lunch. He held it out, palm open. "Come on, buddy. You hungry?" After a long pause, the dog stood up. It took a single step, then another. It limped, its back right leg dragging slightly. Adam's heart clenched. He stayed still, barely breathing, as the dog crept closer, snatched the sandwich, and backed away. But it didn't run. Instead, it sat again, chewing slowly, never breaking eye contact. Adam looked up at the sky. Snowflakes had begun to fall, soft and steady, like whispers. "All right," he murmured, standing. "You win." He opened the back door of the truck and gestured. "In you go." The dog hesitated. Then, to Adam's surprise, it stood and limped toward the vehicle. With some effort, it climbed in and curled into a tight ball on the back seat, eyes still watching him. Adam climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and glanced in the rearview mirror. "You just hit the jackpot, buddy," he said. "Hope you don't snore." The dog said nothing, of course, but its eyes slowly closed, and for the first time in who knows how long, it slept. Adam's cabin was a modest structure tucked into the side of the mountain, isolated, quiet, just the way he liked it. After his wife Emily died 5 years ago, he had withdrawn from everything. Friends, family, even his old dog Bailey, who passed the following winter. Since then, Adam had existed in a kind of hollow rhythm. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. But now there was a stranger in his home. He laid out a blanket by the fire, filled a bowl with water, and set down some leftover chicken and rice. The dog hobbled across the floor with effort, sniffed the food cautiously, and then began to eat. "What the hell happened to you?" Adam whispered. Who could do that to a dog? He didn't expect an answer, but the question echoed in the silence between them. That night, Adam dreamt of Bailey for the first time in years. He was younger in the dream. Emily was laughing in the kitchen. The dog barked at the door, tail wagging. There was warmth, light, life. When Adam woke up, the fire was dying and the cabin was quiet. The dog lay curled up at the foot of the couch, breathing steadily, one paw twitching in a dream. He decided to call him Shadow, not because of his color, which was a mottled mix of brown and black, but because he had appeared from the edge of Adam's world, quiet and unseen, like a shadow moving at the corner of his eye. Over the next week, Shadow began to adjust. He was skittish at first, flinching at sudden noises, avoiding corners, jumping at the sound of boots. Adam suspected he had been abused, maybe abandoned when he got hurt. He took Shadow to the vet, who confirmed a fractured leg that had healed badly, several missing teeth, and signs of previous trauma. "He's a survivor," the vet said. But he'll need time. So Adam gave him time. He talked to Shadow while making breakfast, let him ride in the truck on short errands, and even bought him a soft bed for the living room. Shadow never barked, never begged. He simply followed Adam from room to room, keeping a quiet vigil, as if afraid to be left behind again. It surprised Adam how quickly he came to care for the dog. How natural it felt to have company again. How he found himself smiling at the little things. The way Shadow perked up at the smell of bacon. The way he tilted his head at certain words. The way he leaned just slightly into Adam's leg when he sat beside him. One night, as they sat by the fire, Adam reached out and scratched behind Shadow's ear. "You're a weird one," he said with a chuckle, "but I'm glad you found me." Shadow licked his hand and laid his head on Adam's knee. In that moment, something shifted in Adam's chest. Something long frozen began to thaw. He didn't know it then, but this dog, the broken creature he found by the tracks, would one day do more than just share his home. He would save his life. By mid-December, Shadow had begun to change, and so had Adam. The dog who once flinched at every sound now trotted beside Adam on their daily walks through the snow-covered woods. He was still quiet, still watchful, but his eyes no longer held only fear. There was curiosity now, trust, a hint of joy even. Adam started waking up with a purpose again. He found himself looking forward to the mornings, when Shadow would gently nudge his hand with his cold nose, tail thumping softly against the floor. The coffee tasted richer. The silence in the cabin was no longer lonely. It was peaceful. They developed a rhythm. Adam would light the fire. Shadow would curl up by the hearth. Together, they would sit in the warm glow of the flames, watching the snow fall outside the frosted windows. Sometimes Adam talked about Emily, about the accident, about the loneliness that wrapped around him like a second skin after she died. He spoke slowly, like someone remembering how to use his voice. Shadow never answered, of course, but his eyes never looked away. One night, Adam opened a photo album he hadn't touched in years. He showed Shadow pictures of Bailey, his old Labrador who used to chase squirrels like it was his job, and of Emily, smiling in every frame, her laughter somehow still visible in the paper. "She would have liked you," Adam said. "She had a soft spot for strays." Shadow placed his head on Adam's foot, as if he understood. That winter was harsh. Storms swept across the mountains, blanketing the landscape in feet of snow. Power outages became frequent. The world shrank to the glow of a fireplace, a flashlight, and the quiet companionship of a dog who had once been lost. But even in the worst of it, Adam didn't feel the kind of fear he used to feel when storms rolled in. He wasn't truly alone anymore. Shadow had become more than a pet. He was a guardian, a witness, a reason. On Christmas Eve, Adam cooked a proper dinner for the first time in years. Nothing fancy, just roast chicken, carrots, and mashed potatoes. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and filled a bowl with a mix of meat and rice for Shadow. They ate together, side by side, in the flickering firelight. Later that night, as snow began to fall again, Adam wrapped an old red scarf around Shadow's neck. It was Emily's favorite scarf, the one she wore every Christmas. "You're family now," he said, and for the first time, Shadow wagged his tail. Not timidly, not nervously, but with something close to pride. After New Year's, Shadow began to show signs of playfulness. He started bringing Adam sticks on their walks, digging into snowbanks, chasing the occasional rabbit, unsuccessfully, but with determination. There was a lightness to him that hadn't been there before, a slow, unfurling of spirit that made Adam's chest ache in the best way. But the dog still had his shadows. If someone came too close on the road, Shadow would position himself between Adam and the stranger. When a car backfired nearby, he froze completely, trembling until Adam knelt beside him and whispered reassurances. Whatever had happened in Shadow's past, it hadn't fully released him. One day, a local hiker named Beth stopped by. She often walked the same trails and had become a familiar, friendly face over the past year. She brought over some homemade bread and bent to greet Shadow, but the dog recoiled, growled, a low, guttural sound, and backed against the door. Adam quickly stepped in. "It's okay, boy. She's a friend." Beth gave a soft smile and backed off. "Poor thing," she said gently. "Whoever hurt him, they broke more than his bones." Adam nodded, scratching Shadow's ears to calm him. "He's getting there." Beth tilted her head. "So are you." That night, Adam found Shadow standing by the window, staring into the trees. "Something out there?" Adam asked. Shadow didn't move. The woods were silent. Still, Adam checked the locks and windows before bed, just in case. In the weeks that followed, Shadow grew even more alert, more protective. His instincts sharpened, his posture tense whenever they walked near the edge of the forest. Adam wondered if there were coyotes nearby, or perhaps a bear beginning to stir in its den. But Shadow wasn't afraid. He was waiting. And something deep in Adam's bones told him he was right to. February came in with a vengeance. Snowstorms rolled down from the mountains one after another, burying the trails, cutting off small roads, and frosting the trees with ice, so thick they bent like old men in prayer. The temperature dipped below zero for days at a time, and Adam's world shrank once more to the interior of his cabin. Firelight, canned soup, and the constant presence of Shadow at his side. One morning, the power went out entirely. No radio, no heater, just the fire and the cold seeping through the cracks like a silent tide. Adam bundled up in layers, made sure the water was stocked, and rationed the food. He wasn't worried. This wasn't his first storm up here, but now he had Shadow to think about. The dog was handling it well. He slept curled near the fireplace, always facing the door, always alert. Sometimes he would stand up suddenly in the middle of the night, ears perked, and stalk to the window. He'd stare into the woods, unmoving. Adam looked each time, but there was never anything there. "You're seeing ghosts," he whispered once, patting Shadow's back. "Or maybe you're chasing your old life." But deep down, something gnawed at him. A flicker of intuition he couldn't quite name. Then came the day of the accident. It was late afternoon. The wind was picking up, howling through the trees like an animal in pain. Adam went outside to check the shed, where extra firewood and supplies were stored. The door had blown open again, banging against the wall. He didn't notice the ice. His boot slipped. In an instant, Adam was airborne. And then, with a crack like a splitting tree, he landed awkwardly at the base of the stairs. Pain exploded in his leg. He screamed. He tried to move, but his body betrayed him. His leg was twisted beneath him at a sickening angle, and the snow was already soaking into his clothes, stealing his warmth 1 inch at a time. He lay there, breath steaming in the cold air, blinking up at the gray sky. "Help," he whispered, though there was no one to hear him. No one except Shadow. It took the dog less than a minute to find him. Adam heard the sharp bark first. Short, urgent, slicing through the howling wind. Then he saw Shadow racing through the snowdrifts, his body slicing through the storm like a shadow made real. He skidded to a stop beside Adam, whining, pawing at his chest. "Go get help," Adam gasped. "Beth, go!" But Shadow didn't move. Instead, he stepped behind Adam, hooked his body under Adam's arms, and began to pull. Adam couldn't believe it at first. The pain blurred his vision, but he felt the unmistakable drag of movement. Inch by inch, Shadow was pulling him toward the cabin. The door seemed miles away, but Shadow didn't give up. Every few feet, he paused, whimpered, then pulled again. Digging his paws into the snow, his body trembling with effort. Adam wanted to cry, not just from pain, but from the sheer aching devotion in the dog's eyes. "Good boy," he gasped. "Good boy." By the time they reached the porch, Adam was nearly unconscious. His vision tunneled, dark at the edges. He couldn't feel his fingers. Shadow barked again, loud, insistent. Somewhere deep inside, Adam registered the sound of a snowmobile engine. Then, a voice, Beth's, calling his name. "Adam?" Moments later, warm hands grabbed him. Blankets. Movement. Heat. Darkness. He woke up in a hospital bed 2 days later, leg in a cast, IV in his arm. Beth was there, reading a book beside the bed. She looked up when he stirred. "Hey there," she said softly. "You scared the hell out of me." Adam blinked. "Shadow?" She smiled. "He's fine. At your place. I'm feeding him twice a day. Don't worry. He hasn't left the front door once. Just sits there, staring out the window, waiting for you." Adam's eyes filled with tears. He looked away quickly, but Beth touched his hand. "He saved your life," she said gently. "He dragged you all the way to the porch. If he hadn't, I wouldn't have found you in time." Adam closed his eyes, his throat tightening. Shadow had come into his life, broken and silent, with scars no one could see. And now he'd repaid kindness with loyalty beyond anything Adam had known. 3 days later, Adam returned home. He was on crutches, groggy, slower than before. But he made it. Shadow met him at the door with a sound Adam had never heard before. A full-throated, joyous bark. The dog ran circles around him, tail wagging, eyes shining. Adam laughed and knelt down, hugging him tightly. "You crazy, beautiful dog," he whispered into his fur. "You saved me." Shadow licked his face, then sat proudly at his side, his head high, like a knight standing watch over his king. And in that moment, Adam understood. They had rescued each other. Spring came late that year. The snow melted slowly, leaving behind thick mud and swollen creeks. Trees began to bud, cautiously, as if unsure if the world was ready to bloom again. Adam was healing, but not just his leg. Something inside him, long buried, had started to grow back too. He no longer moved through life like a ghost. The ache in his heart was still there. Grief never truly left, but it no longer devoured him. His days had color again. Laughter sometimes, warmth. All because of one dog who had limped into his life from the edge of a storm. Shadow never left his side. Even as Adam hobbled on crutches, even as he relearned how to trust his body again, Shadow was always there. Quiet, steady, watching. They walked the trails together once Adam could manage short distances, stopping often to rest. Shadow would lie beside him patiently, ears flicking at every bird call, eyes scanning the trees. He was still a protector, even in peace. Beth visited more often, bringing groceries, conversation, and occasionally baked pies she insisted weren't burned, though they always were, just a little. "I think Shadow likes me now," she said one afternoon as they sat on the porch. "He doesn't growl anymore." Adam chuckled. "He's not great with people. Took him weeks to warm up to me." "He trusts you," she said simply. "You gave him a second chance." Adam looked at the dog, who was lying at his feet, eyes half closed, body relaxed for once. "He gave me one too." Beth hesitated, then asked, "Have you ever thought about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that night? If you hadn't picked him up?" Adam nodded. All the time. He didn't say it out loud, but the thought haunted him. The idea that Shadow might have died cold and alone on those tracks, while Adam continued his own quiet descent into solitude. That both of them might have disappeared without anyone ever knowing. They had saved each other in more ways than one. But life has a way of testing bonds forged in fire. One night in late April, the phone rang. Adam almost didn't answer. He rarely got calls, and it was already past 10. But something urged him to pick it up. It was Beth. "Adam," she said quickly, "there's a wildfire in the lower valley. The wind's changed. It's moving up the ridge. Fast. You need to pack what you can and get out." Adam stood, heart pounding. "How long do I have?" "Not long. I'm coming to help you." "No," Adam said firmly. "You need to stay safe. I'll go. I've done this before." He hung up and turned to Shadow. The dog was already on his feet, ears up, tail still. Adam moved quickly, adrenaline dulling the pain in his still recovering leg. He grabbed a small duffel bag, stuffed in his important documents, medications, a few clothes, then the photo album. The one with Emily, with Bailey. He looked around the cabin, the old wooden beams, the worn leather chair, the fireplace that had kept him warm for years. Then he whistled. "Shadow, let's go." The dog trotted to the door, but stopped suddenly. He was staring at the back window, growling low. Adam followed his gaze. Flames. Far, but coming fast. Orange veins in the darkness, licking up from the base of the mountain like fingers clawing their way up. Adam grabbed Shadow's leash, but the dog didn't move. Instead, he bolted to the back of the house, toward the utility room. "Shadow!" Adam shouted. "Come on!" But when he followed, he found the dog barking, pawing at the floor near the pantry. At first, Adam didn't understand until he heard it. A mule, faint, high-pitched, desperate, kittens. Someone, maybe a stray cat from the woods, had hidden her litter inside the old crawl space beneath the pantry. And they were trapped. "God," Adam whispered, "we don't have time." But Shadow didn't move. He barked louder, more insistently. Adam dropped the bag, fell to his knees, and yanked open the floor hatch. There, under the boards, huddled in a ragged nest of leaves and paper, were 3 tiny kittens, their eyes barely open, shivering. "No mother," Adam muttered. "She must have run." He hesitated. The fire was coming. But Shadow didn't. The dog gently nudged the smallest kitten with his nose, then looked up at Adam. It wasn't a question. It was a demand. Adam wrapped the kittens in an old towel, shoved them into a shoebox, and picked up his bag again. "All right," he said. "Let's go." They drove through smoke and embers, through winding roads lit orange by the burning sky. Adam coughed violently, eyes watering. The air was thick and acrid, and sirens blared in the distance. Shadow sat in the back seat beside the box of kittens, nose pressed against the lid as if guarding them. They made it to the ranger outpost just before the fire crested the hill. Beth was there, waiting, her eyes red from smoke and worry. When she saw Adam's truck, she ran to meet him. "You made it," she breathed, throwing her arms around him. Adam gestured to the back. He wouldn't leave them. Beth peered inside and blinked at the tiny forms mewing weakly in their towel. "You've got to be kidding." "Nope," Adam said. "Your pies may be burnt, but your dog instincts were right. He's a hero." She laughed, half sobbing. Shadow, still calm, rested his head on Adam's shoulder as if to say, "I told you so." That night, they sat in sleeping bags at the outpost, watching the sky glow orange in the distance. The fire would take Adam's cabin, his home, the place where Emily's voice still echoed in the walls. But he didn't feel broken. Not this time. He looked at Shadow, curled beside the kittens, now fast asleep in a cardboard box between 2 space heaters. And for the first time since Emily died, Adam felt whole. Because home wasn't the cabin, it was who you survived with. The fire took nearly everything. By the time Adam returned to the ridge 2 weeks later, escorted by a ranger and Beth, there was little left of his old life. The cabin had burned to its stone foundation. The trees around it were skeletal now, charred black against a pale sky. Ash crunched underfoot as he stepped onto the scorched earth. No more porch. No more hearth. No more creaky floors warmed by firelight. The photo album had been in his bag, saved. But everything else, every echo of Emily woven into those walls, had vanished in flame. He thought he would cry. But standing there, with Shadow beside him and Beth's hand on his shoulder, he felt strangely calm. There was grief, yes, but it wasn't the soul-swallowing kind. It was quieter, accepting. Life had taken, but it had also given. And in the ashes, he saw something new, a beginning. They didn't go back to the cabin site after that, not for a long while. Adam stayed with Beth for the time being. She insisted, and he didn't have the strength to argue. Her place was small but warm, full of books and plants and strange little ceramic animals that stared at you from every shelf. Shadow adapted quickly. He made himself at home on the rug in front of the fireplace and stood guard by the door like it was his solemn duty. The kittens survived. All three. Beth took them in temporarily, but it was obvious from the start who they truly belonged to. Shadow. He hovered over them with the gravity of a parent, sniffing at their ears, watching them play with an intensity that bordered on paternal. Once, when one of them fell off the couch with a squeak, he darted over and licked her tiny head like a worried mother. Beth joked, "I think he thinks they're his." Adam replied, "Maybe they are." Summer came slowly, like a cautious guest. The trees around the valley began to green again. Wildflowers pushed up through the ash. And inside Adam, something shifted. One morning, while watching the sun rise through Beth's kitchen window, he turned to her and said, "I think I want to rebuild." She didn't ask him why. She just smiled. "Then we'll rebuild." It took time, paperwork, permits. Money Adam didn't really have. But Beth helped. So did neighbors. And a local carpenter who had once been rescued by search and rescue after Shadow barked his head off during a snowstorm. "Repaying the debt," the man said, shaking Adam's hand. "That dog saved more than one life." They built smaller this time, simpler. Just 2 bedrooms, an open kitchen, a wide front porch where Adam could sit and watch the world heal around him. And when it was finished, almost a year after the fire, Adam opened the front door, let Shadow walk in first, and whispered, "We're home." The dog wagged his tail, turned in a slow circle in the middle of the living room, and let out one sharp bark. Approval. The story of Shadow spread further than Adam expected. The local newspaper wrote a piece called "The Dog Who Pulled a Man Back from the Ashes." A rescue group tracked down the shelter that had first taken Shadow in after he'd been found by the tracks, and someone recognized him. His real name had been Ghost. He had escaped an illegal fighting ring in a nearby county. They'd assumed he was dead, scarred, half-starved, never trained to trust people. But he had run, survived, and found a home. Adam decided not to change his name again. Shadow fit him better now. Not a ghost. Not anymore. Just a faithful, silent companion who had watched, waited, and saved. A year to the day after the fire, Adam and Beth stood on the rebuilt porch, with Shadow between them, the now-grown cats curled like commas around his feet. "I never thought I'd have this again," Adam said, his voice quiet. Beth leaned into him. "You didn't find this. You made it." Adam looked at Shadow. The dog's muzzle was beginning to gray now. He moved a little slower, but his eyes were just as sharp, just as knowing. "I wouldn't have made it without him," Adam said. Beth smiled. "Maybe, but he wouldn't have made it without you either." They stood in silence, the breeze moving gently through the new trees. Behind them, inside, the fireplace crackled. In front of them, the sky stretched wide and open, the mountains steady and strong. Shadow stepped forward, looked out across the valley, and sat, watching, waiting, still guarding something that could never quite be named. But Adam knew. It was home. It was love. It was the life they had built, not from nothing, but from what remained, from what mattered, from each other.